I am Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's the author of the book Zenith Man, no other than Mr. McCracken Poston Jr. Welcome to Book 101, Miss Kraken and Mr. Kraken. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Well, my first name is McCracken. My last name is Poston, and I am named for my father, so I'm McCracken Poston Jr., and I wanted to honor him by calling myself that on the book. Um, I wrote a book called Zenith Man: Death, Love, and Redemption in a Georgia Courtroom, and it's a true story, a murder trial from 25 years ago, more than 25 years ago now, where I was the lawyer for this man. The title comes from the fact that my client was a Zenith brand TV repairman and salesperson until he abruptly closed his business, started suing everyone in town, and basically became a malcontent and a litigious character that made no friends by his actions. And meanwhile, I was in politics for a decade and lost decisively a race for the United States Congress in 1996. So, less than a year later, everyone in this small town of Ringgold, Georgia, hears that there's a dead woman at Alvin Ridley's house. And everybody, including myself, thought that he had lived alone since his parents had died. And none of us really knew that he had a wife. Ringgold, Georgia is famous for this is the place that Dolly Parton and her husband uh, slipped away to from Nashville, Tennessee, and got married in 1966. Well, 3 weeks later, this couple, Alvin and Virginia Ridley, also got married here. And of course, they lived here. But by the time George Jones and Tammy Wynette slipped down from Nashville to get married in 1969, Virginia was missing. Her parents, from this 1968 article, put in an article in the newspaper saying that she was missing. The next time the public at large heard about Virginia Ridley was when she was found dead at Alvin's house. And this is a national tabloid article titled Sicko Holds Wife Hostage for 30 Years and Then Kills Her. So I ended up representing Alvin Ridley, and the book is about 15 months of representing the most difficult person I'd ever dealt with in my life. He seemed hell bent on kneecapping everything I was trying to do to help him. So it was an extremely difficult case. It left me baffled. I was pulling my hair out because I just could not get the guy to cooperate. Well, again, the book is about 15 months of this. We finally started to catch some breaks in the case, um, just unusual things that happened. One being the death of the American Olympic track star Florence Griffith Joyner in 1998. It turns out that her death was significant and that she died of a seizure disorder. And I utilized her autopsy to show that the state of Georgia was wrong to conclude that Virginia Ridley had been murdered. Our theory, because Virginia had suffered from epilepsy since childhood, was that she died from a seizure, and she had all the indications that that was the case. What's even more interesting, for 14 months, Alvin would not let me in his house. Because of articles like this, I insisted on going in to prove that there were no bars on the windows, no unusual uh, locked uh, places in the house. And it actually took me showing up with a turkey plate on Thanksgiving that my parents insisted that I give him, that he let me in. And it turned out throughout the 15 months of representation, I realized that he's very transactional. I also realized that he was very literal. He was very literal in his analysis of a question, for example. And he was also obsessive about some things in the past. One was in a civil action, there was a counterclaim, and the counterclaimant thought they got a writ judgment against Alvin, and they levied on a property of his, and that was a 1977 Chevrolet van. Alvin was obsessed with the fact that this was done to him. He would not let it go. When I would try to get him to talk about his wife, he would say, "No, we don't need to talk about that because I didn't kill her. But we do need to talk about them taking my van because they did take my van." I later learned that the van was only gone 3 weeks, and they tried to give it back to him, but he refused to accept it. So it just sat rotting away in his yard for, at the time of the I was representing him, 14 years, and as of last July, 40 years, untouched by the man who was very strong in his opinions. As it turned out, Daniel, and this is what inspired me to write the book, because I wanted to write it. Uh, Alvin and I both participated in, and this is why your viewers and listeners may recognize my name. It is an unusual name, but we gave away this story to Forensic Files, A&E's American Justice, um, the Washington Post, People Magazine, and and they did features on this case. But I was unsatisfied at the end of all of these features because I really couldn't explain my client other than frustratingly saying, I can't figure the guy out. Um, in 2021, just 4 years ago, one of the jurors from the case had become a nurse in Alaska, and she reached out to me and suggested that perhaps Alvin Ridley is autistic. And nobody really knew much about adult autism in the late 1990s. There was no discussion of it. There was certainly no uh, effort to diagnose it. The state psychologist found, among other things, that Alvin was paranoid, but that didn't explain just how difficult he was to work with. And so I thought this will explain everything. And I took Alvin to a doctor in Atlanta who did diagnose him as being on the autism spectrum and having been on it all of his life. It explains so much. It explains so much about everything that made the case difficult. And I apologized to Alvin because I had been very frustrated throughout the representation, and I actually apologized to him, and he was very gracious, a sweet person, uh, and he was feared. He was considered the boogeyman by a community that did not understand him, and I was one of those people until I got to know him. Now, another way that some of your viewers may have heard my name is the podcast Noble, which was the #1 Apple podcast last summer. And it was about the tri state crematory cases in North Georgia in the early 2000s. That was my case as well. And so if you are a fan of that podcast, then that's where you've heard of me before. Um, Alvin really was the biggest challenge I had ever had. Um, he and I uh, became friends by the end of the trial. Um, I kind of helped him manage, not knowing what his issues were. Um, Myself and my secretary would help him kind of manage things in life over the years. I got him new teeth, and I got him to his cataract surgeries, and I helped him purchase cars when he needed them, just by helping him find a car. I got him on disability, so he was able to use his own money. But it really ended up being a sweet story, not your usual true crime. It's kind of a story of redemption. I think everybody in the book was acting on their best behavior, even the prosecutors and the police, and Virginia's family, her sister and brothers, sisters and brother, who had not seen her in 30 years and who kind of carried on the old family lore that Alvin was keeping her from seeing them. And Virginia had an additional condition in addition to her epilepsy. And I didn't know about it until the night before I put my epilepsy expert on the stand. He asked if there was anything else unusual about this woman. And because of getting into Alvin's house, I made an incredible discovery of 15 to 20,000 loose leaf pages of a 30-year diary where Virginia talked about everything. She talked about the moon landings. She talked about um, people in the community, and she was always getting that kind of information from Alvin. But she watched television a lot, and she kind of had a strange fangirl, innocent obsession with actor, director, and producer Ron Howard. She wrote about him a lot. She was very glowing about his work, and I got to get one of those documents into the trial to show the jury that she actually, was kind of connected to popular culture. So it was a very emotional case. Um, Alvin was not going to testify because Alvin is so difficult that I didn't want him to testify. And then next to last day of the trial, we went to lunch. Alvin sat at a separate table with some fans that he started to accumulate. And he says that Jesus appeared to him during lunch and ordered him to testify. Well, in Georgia, that is a defendant's call. I could not keep him from testifying, nor could I make him testify if he didn't want to. But the fact that he said that Jesus appeared to him and ordered him to testify, uh, I think he thought I needed to hear that. And so I put him on the stand, really not having prepared him because of his seeming uh, cold and distant nature. I thought it would hurt him. Alvin testified beautifully. He was truly aggrieved. He truly loved this woman. And from her writings, you could tell that she was quite strong willed herself. And knowing his personality, I would imagine that she probably was boss in the relationship. So there's a lot of unusual twists and turns, and most of them come directly from the trial transcript. And I've been fortunate to have been endorsed by a number of great people in their own right. One is John Meacham, the New York Times bestselling author and winner of the Pulitzer Prize. Um, and one is Rory Kennedy, the Emmy Award winning documentary filmmaker. Um, Both of them read and endorsed my book. Uh, I really just want to spread Alvin's story as far as I can spread it. It's an important story. There are 5 million undiagnosed adults with autism in the United States alone. All of them are subject to the misunderstandings and the misjudgments that Alvin suffered because a lot of times police, lawyers, and even judges, they uh, they just wouldn't understand um, this person who's not really processing what they're saying, and they're not certainly not processing the reason why that person is the way uh, they are being. And so there's a great risk of injustice with these things. So I've really enjoyed the fact that families with autistic loved ones have reached out to me. They love the book for various reasons. But interestingly, school teachers tell me when they get me aside, they say, I knew from page one. In other words, in today's time, these professionals and family members can instantly diagnose Alvin from the behavior that I was uh, describing. And I was writing from the position of ignorance that I held for 22 or 24 years. So it's been a wonderful thing to be able to continue to tell Alvin's story. And I really appreciate you having me on to tell it. And I would love to answer any of your questions or
So, Mr. Poston, what message or questions do you hope readers are left with after reading Zenith Man?
well, I hope they're not looking for questions because that meant I failed as an author. But I am describing about the millions of people who are still not diagnosed. So I'm hoping that this affords police, lawyers, and judges the impetus to get better training so that they can understand um, every aspect of the autism spectrum, perhaps to explain someone's behavior in court. Or, for example, Alvin several times either bolted from a courtroom or threatened to, and that could have gotten him in a lot of trouble. And so I had to bail him out of a bad situation one time, and it just was very difficult. But Alvin and I became quite close. Alvin passed away last July, but it was after the book came out. But when the autism diagnosis uh, came through, and Alvin allowed me to talk about it on social media, we immediately began to detect a change in heart in this community where persons with an autistic loved one would approach us during our weekly lunches. And they were showing Alvin warmth and affection that he had never felt in his life. And he was lifted up by his diagnosis. And so by the time the book came out, he became a rock star. He was so good with big crowds. He would still be Alvin, but he had just this perfect timing. I was always the straight man, and he was the cut up. It seemed, and it was just a really beautiful thing to see the community show him love and affection for the first time in his whole adult life.
So, Mr. Poston, how has this story impacted you personally, either as a writer or as a human being?
Well, I practiced the old vomit draft uh, uh, theory, and that's just throw everything on the page. And with a 90,000 word contract, I ended up throwing up 177,000 words. So I put a lot more into it than I even thought would come out. And a lot of it was about my personal life and how, this story, this story changed me in a positive way. And I hope people can get something like that out of it as well.
Totally agree, Mr. Poston. So, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. Other podcast, because my abstract essay is now on its fifth season, people. Abstract poetry in second season, and Book 101 Review, fifth season already, and Comedy 101 and second season, Food 101 and its fifth season too, Geography 101 and its third season, and as well as my love letters and my baby podcast, Mental Health 101 and Movie 101 Review in its third season, as well as my Music 101.
Daniel, when do you have time for this? Do you have a time machine stored away behind you there?
Yes,
I don't
indeed.
understand how you can do all this. How many people are listening, for example, to Book 101?
Book
How many?
101 review, according to my uh for Spotify alone, I think I have a 16,000 listeners, avid listeners on Spotify. For
Well,
the Apple podcast,
I would be honored for. Oh, you are on Apple as well.
yes, on all platform of podcast platforms. So from Apple, Spotify, and other uh podcast platform. All my podcasts are available. So people, I encourage you to listen
Well, this
to.
is fantastic, and I want to ask everyone, please. There are more
Yes.
than one book with this title. Someone wrote a fictional account of our story and gave it the same name, Zenith Man. So please look for The Kissing Couple. That's Alvin and Virginia in a photo booth in 1965. And
Yes.
I hope that I hope that your listeners will, if you like true crime, if you like a love story, it rings both bells. And I would please ask that you consider reviewing it. I'd be honored.
Definitely. I will, Mr. Poston. I will. So, for my last question, are there other stories like this at the intersection of crime, humanity, and redemption you'd like to tell next?
Well, the story that was told in the Apple podcast Noble, that's Noble, that is the one everybody wants me to write. But there's a lot of aspects about that that are, I'm just trying to find the right approach. Um, Having practiced law now almost 40 years, there are a lot of interesting cases and criminal law most of that time. Um, and so there's plenty of material. I'm still enjoying telling Alvin Ridley's story right now, and I want to honor him by doing that. Alvin left more of an estate than you would expect a man of modest appearance to have, but he wanted all of his estate to go to establish a scholarship for autistic children. And so that's what my goal is, to get that estate established. I'm waiving my fees as administrator, executor, so that all of it, as Alvin wanted, to go to the scholarship. And so I'm very excited that his name will live on, perhaps longer than mine.
Mr. McCracken Poston Jr., thank you so much for bringing Zenith Man to the world. And can you please invite our listeners to support the book itself?
Thank you so much.
Yes, so where you can buy the Zenith Man, mister?
You can buy it at all uh, ways to order books. Certainly Amazon and Books a Million and Barnes and Noble, and in some independent bookstores you can, all of them, you can order it through their website.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. McCracken Poston Jr. because if you support him, more and more and more Zenith Man to come. So, Mr. Kraken, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
Bodycon people, see you soon.